Sydney.
Very appropriate, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And my question is to the Prime Minister. I remind the Prime Minister of her response to John Laws in July last year when he demanded a list of the 500 companies who will pay the carbon tax. And I quote the Prime Minister, "So there is a list available that we can send you, John. That's available on the website. We can send that through to you." When will the Prime Minister keep her promise and release the list of 500 companies that will start paying the world's biggest carbon tax in just 4 months?
I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in answer to the member's question, as the member would probably be aware, there is greenhouse gas reporting legislation which dates from the period of the Howard government, and so people can get on the website and have a look at that information. As I have made the point before, that information is, of course, not directly comparable to how carbon pricing will work, because under the legislation that was in this parliament, and I'm presuming that the opposition looked at it before they voted against it and voted to endorse their shambolic scheme, they would be aware that the carbon price liability falls on sites that generate carbon pollution in excess of 25,000 tonnes, and we've had these debates in the parliament before because, of course, there was a period of time when the Leader of the Opposition was saying you couldn't measure carbon pollution.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat. The honourable member for North Sydney.
It goes to relevance, Mr. Speaker, and it's simply a question of when the Prime Minister will release the list that she said she'd released last July.
The Prime Minister has the call to answer the specifics of the question. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm explaining to the House the
Prime Minister will be heard in silence for the duration of her answer. The Prime Minister.
And I'm explaining to the House the mechanisms under the carbon pollution legislation, our Clean Energy Future legislation that went through the parliament, and the identification of which sites and businesses will pay a carbon price. Mr. Speaker, of course, when the legislation comes into operation on the 1st of July, businesses will commence paying that price. There is the ability to measure, as has been shown by past legislation. What should strike the opposition at this point, as they talk about these matters, is that the legislation to first track carbon pollution emissions was introduced by the Howard government. It was described then, and I quote the member for Wentworth when he introduced it, as this bill, that law is
Order. The Prime Minister will be directly relevant.
Thank you, and I'm responding to the question in regard to the measuring of carbon emissions, and I'm referring to the member for Wentworth's statement under the legislation I have referred to, that this bill is the first major step in establishing the Australian Emissions Trading Scheme. Mr. Speaker, a time when they believed in carbon pricing, political hypocrisy from them now.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat. The Leader of the Opposition on a supplementary question.
And Mr. Speaker, I don't wish to embarrass the Prime Minister, but I wish to ask again.
The Leader, if he has a supplementary question, should ask it as a supplementary question without preamble.
And Mr. Speaker, given that the previous question wasn't answered, I wish to ask as a supplementary the same question. Where is the list and when will she produce it?
The Leader of the House?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, by his own admission of the Leader of the Opposition, that should be ruled out of order because he himself said it wasn't a supplementary.
Will resume his seat, and I call the Prime Minister to answer the supplementary question.
Thank you very much. I've just explained the way in which the carbon pricing legislation will work, and I don't want to embarrass the Leader of the Opposition, but when is he going to explain his hypocrisy in going to the 2007 election wanting to put a price on carbon?
Order. The Prime Minister will pause. Honourable members on my left have to understand, as do all honourable members, that the office of Prime Minister must be respected, as indeed is the office of the Leader of the Opposition, and I will not tolerate a crescendo of sound at a level that the Prime Minister cannot be heard. The Prime Minister has the call. Has the Prime Minister finished? Prime Minister's finished. The honourable member for Lyme has the call.